Greetings and welcome to the Game of the Year coverage here at Words About Games. 2-ish weeks of intense coverage of all the best and worst games of 2018, celebrating the good times and the excellent games, as well as taking a look forward at 2019, making some predictions for the year ahead and highlighting some of the most exciting games that are due to make an appearance in the next 12 months. Today we're kicking off our coverage with the first part of our top 30 games of 2018. Who'd have thought that a mixture of platforming, Metroidvania design, and pinball mechanics would lead to one of the most charming games of 2018? Yet that's the most accurate breakdown of YOKU'S Island Express, one of the most delightful games I played all year. The platforming and pinball mechanics are perfectly in sync and highly intuitive, split between sections of free exploration that lead to areas resembling crazy pinball machines that play like deviously simple platforming puzzles, the likes of which I've never really seen before. Throwing in new moves and abilities which both unlock new areas of the island and deepen the puzzle mechanics is a great touch. As you unravel more of the island and find new ways to traverse it, the puzzles become more complex without ever losing their approachability. This ease of play meshes really well with the bright, colourful island and the charming cast of characters to create one of the sweetest games of 2018. I spent the latter half of 2018 watching Battlefield 5 ripped to shreds in certain sections of the media and gaming community. Complaints about a lack of content and historical accuracy in a game where you can be blown up by a tank and picked up by a nearby soldier fit and healthy to keep fighting the enemy more or less have overshadowed the game itself. Battlefield 5 is a very good multiplayer shooter. Its first-person shooting mechanics are as slick and satisfying as I've come to expect from the Battlefield series, which have gone a long way towards keeping me invested in diving into matches long after I published my video on the game, which is something of a rarity with modern competitive first-person shooters. The class-based gameplay helps, allowing someone like me who isn't overly proficient at killing enemies the chance to contribute by dropping ammo or focusing on picking up and healing squad mates. It's the surprising atmosphere of the multiplayer that keeps me hooked though. Where the single-player war stories feel like they're trying too hard, the huge multiplayer matches do a fantastic job of making you feel like you're in the midst of an actual battle, as opposed to just playing another round of competitive multiplayer. The excellent sound design, destructible environments, and banter between soldiers goes a long way to deepening the multiplayer experience, to the point that it actually does a better job of storytelling than its single-player counterpart. Sea of Thieves was heavily criticised when it launched due to a lack of meaningful content. I should know, I was one of the people criticising it. Most players could see just about everything the game had to offer in around 10 to 15 hours, which is a lot for a normal game, but not when your game is an online multiplayer pirate experience, whose value is in enticing you back again and again. And yet, despite this, I was enticed back. While many will point to the steady stream of free content updates beefing up Sea of Thieves' offering, the game still does have a bit of a content shortage, and the combat is still poor. I still have a laundry list of thoughts about how the game could be improved, but I've also never failed to have a good time in Sea of Thieves. This is entirely down to my personal circumstances, as I've always had a crew willing to board a ship with me. Lord knows why, after the now infamous brig incident of 2018. I've smiled and laughed more while playing Sea of Thieves than with almost any other game on this list. It's so effortlessly easy to have a good time, whether you're exploring, completing quests, trying to judge whether those players you've just met are planning to murder you for your treasure, or just messing around in the game world. Usually it's a combination of all four. Whenever I jumped into Sea of Thieves, I always walked away with a smile on my face and a new story or two.
You tell anyone what you saw back there? You're a dead man.
I didn't love Red Dead Redemption 2. This opinion hasn't made me popular with a lot of my gaming friends, nor is it one that I'm particularly happy about myself. In 2010, Red Dead Redemption was my overall game of the year, a truly remarkable experience that I was hoping I'd get to repeat in 2018. Sadly, there were too many issues pushing me away from falling head over heels in love for a second time. Don't get me wrong, I liked Red Dead Redemption 2 despite this. The game's world is remarkable, probably one of the best that's ever existed in an open world game. It feels like a living, breathing place as opposed to a series of NPC hubs and quest locations, stuffed full of interesting encounters and things to find. Some of my most memorable gaming moments of 2018 were the discoveries I made while wandering through the world of Red Dead Redemption 2. The time I stumbled across a hut in the middle of nowhere full of corpses, the aftermath of a suicide cult, was genuinely unsettling and unexpected. My issue is the clunky, dated gameplay and the level of realism which crosses the line into overburdening. Combat and movement are slow and unsatisfying. Actions such as looting take an unbearably long time for the sake of being realistic, and the added hunger and thirst mechanics are incredibly unwelcome. Most seem to be able to look past these quirks, or actively enjoy them, to the amazing world, story, and characters that surround them, and more power to them. But for me personally, Red Dead Redemption 2 is an amazing world that I struggle to enjoy over long periods of time. A good game, as opposed to an amazing one. VR had a quietly excellent year by all accounts, and though I missed out on a lot of it due to some technical problems that I aim to rectify in the beginning of 2019, one VR experience I did get to have was Moss, a fairy tale come to life quite literally around you. This is a game that is bursting with charm and personality. Protagonist Quill is hands down one of the most adorable characters 2018 produced, thanks in no small part to the way the game has been designed around its virtual reality medium. Putting you in the middle of the game as a character is a stroke of genius that Moss takes full advantage of. Having Quill be fully aware of your towering presence, observing the world from a height, allows your interactions with her to be more personal, grounding you in the world in a way that just wouldn't have been possible in a more traditional, non-VR setting. When you're stuck on a puzzle, Quill will point out solutions. When you solve it, she'll celebrate with you. You can even high-five her, something which almost guaranteed Moss a place on this list alone. The gameplay being so tight helps enormously too. While the most obvious avenue for a VR game to take is that of a first-person perspective, and technically Moss is a first-person game, I'm loving that developers have used the medium to experiment with other genres. What could have been a cute, fairly standard adventure game has been given another level in virtual reality. Environmental puzzles are solved by you reaching into the world and directly manipulating it, moving objects, turning levers and such. Exploring environments is twofold, by controlling Quill, but also by looking around yourself, physically. If you have a VR headset, Moss is a wonderful experience that I can recommend without reservation. Forza Horizon 4 feels like the culmination of Playground Games' Horizon series. Like they've taken everything they learned from the previous 3 games and presented us with the best possible version of Forza Horizon. Yes, that's more or less an accurate description of what a good sequel should do, but here it really feels like it's true. The recreation of the UK in Forza Horizon 4 feels like the most assured world Playground have created yet. So much so that it seems difficult to see how the developer could possibly improve for a potential 5th game in the series. But that's a problem for the future. In the here and now, we have Forza Horizon 4, a brilliant open world that does an excellent job of tying its progression systems into whatever its many varied activities you feel like doing. While the emphasis here is on the various different types of racing opportunities that exist, there's so much more to see and do here that you could easily ignore racing altogether and still feel a sense of meaningful progression. Whether you fancy exploring the countryside, partaking in the many different quest lines, performing crazy, death-defying stunts, or blasting around the UK with your friends in open-ended gameplay, Forza Horizon 4 has you covered. And that's before I even talk about the seasons, which roll around to completely change and upend the world and how you interact with it. Summer sees you driving through a sun-soaked and pristine Britain, which isn't exactly accurate, but I'll let Playground off. Where winter covers the world in treacherous snow and ice, and spring lashes rain down on you at every turn, also known as an actual British summer. The differences are so drastic that it can honestly make you feel like you're playing different games each time the season changes, leading to hours upon hours of good times. Maybe I really got into Moonlighter because of how much I related to the life and ambitions of its protagonist. You play as a shopkeeper by day who, after closing time, pursues their true passion of dungeon diving. That pretty much sums up my life to a T. Well, except for the dungeon diving part. Though streaming and creating YouTube content about video games does sometimes feel just as demanding and dangerous as entering a dungeon filled with fantasy monsters who want to tear you apart for daring to invade their realm. It's a very satisfying gameplay loop. By night, you sneak away into the nearby dungeon, and the game takes the form of an action RPG with roguelite elements, as you work your way through various dungeon levels, learning how to manipulate enemy attack patterns and collecting loot. Loot which you'll take back to your shop to sell during the daytime, paying for upgrades to your shop, restoring the village, and upgrading the protagonist's abilities. It's a satisfying progression curve, and there's just as much fun balancing these different upgrade paths and finding the sweet spot of how much you can sell loot for as there is in whacking monsters in the various dungeons. It becomes compulsive, and I found myself lost in a loop of just one more day several times as I worked on my impressions video. Once you've gathered your loot, you'll want to sell it. Once you've sold it, you'll want to buy your upgrades. Once you've bought your upgrades, you'll want to test them in the dungeon and collect more loot, and on and on. Combine that with satisfying core gameplay, and Moonlighter is a game that can be difficult to walk away from.
Ho! Yay!
As soon as Nintendo announced Super Mario Party at E3 with a back-to-basics approach that restored the board game mechanics of older entries, I knew this would be a party game I'd enjoy busting out whenever the opportunity arose. And thankfully the opportunity arrives fairly often thanks to the Nintendo Switch's portability. Here we are months later, and Super Mario Party has become a mainstay of my multiplayer gaming time. This is in no small part thanks to how accessible the game is, even to people who don't necessarily play many or any games. While my other go-to multiplayer games such as Smash Bros, Towerfall or Overwatch are generally reserved for my gamer friends and I, Super Mario Party is a game anyone can pick up and play, making it a very versatile addition to my gaming library. The board game sections are easy to grasp, and the mini-games that punctuate each round are fully explained, with easy to pick up controls and welcome practice sessions for those unfamiliar with the general mechanics of a video game. All this, and the fact that it's just damn fun to play, makes Super Mario Party an easy recommendation as one of the best games we've seen released in 2018. Living life 60 seconds at a time is stressful. That's the core premise behind Minute, an adventure game inspired by classic entries in the Legend of Zelda series, where you play as the appropriately named Minute, I think, who acquires a cursed sword that kills the owner every minute. Every 60 seconds you'll respawn with all your previous progress intact and embark on a rushed and frantic journey to make more before your next minute is up. Luckily, you can accomplish a lot in 60 seconds. Minute is an incredibly cleverly designed game. The self-imposed 60-second cycles force the player and developers to get creative. Each task or objective in the game can be accomplished in less than 60 seconds. It just takes some time to figure out how you're going to manage everything with a literal ticking clock of doom hanging over you. It shifts the focus of Minute being a straight-up adventure game to having a lot in common with puzzle games. You'll spend lives exploring and experimenting, seeing what paths and interactions are open to you, and pushing yourself as far and as fast as you can with the fleeting time that you have. It's a compulsive gameplay loop. Respawns are near instantaneous, and you can voluntarily end a run and revive yourself at a checkpoint to reset the timer if you screw up or want to explore somewhere else quickly. Unlocking more of the world and progressing the game is satisfying and, thanks to the naturally quick-paced nature of the game, constantly rewards you for your exploration and problem-solving abilities. Just maybe next time, don't pick up the cursed sword that cuts your life expectancy down to roughly the amount of time it takes to listen to the Tetris theme. Grace is one of the most beautiful games I've ever laid eyes on. This is a watercolour painting in motion, a beautiful work of art that also happens to be a chilled-out puzzle platformer. Seriously, Look at it. I fell in love with the art style of Gris from the moment I saw the thumbnail for the announcement trailer on Twitter, and getting to play it and see it in action was awe-inspiring. Of course, Gris doesn't make my Game of the Year list because it looks pretty. It's also an incredibly pleasant experience, a relaxing stroll through a beautiful landscape that tells an emotional story without words. You start off in a black and white world after something terrible happens to the protagonist, pressing through this strange new environment, picking up new abilities, and adding new colours to the world itself. New abilities unlock new areas and new ways to solve puzzles, with new colours adding new dimensions to the environment, such as blue making it rain or green causing vegetation to explode from the ground. It's all driven by almost relaxing, stress-free gameplay. There's no enemies and no death in Gris, merely environmental puzzles. Brain teasers designed to hamper your progress until you figure out how to overcome them, usually with one of your newfound abilities. They're really cleverly designed, not too challenging that they'll stump your progress, yet not overly simple either. Basically, they're like the Goldilocks of platforming puzzles. And did I mention that the game is stunningly gorgeous? Thank you very much for watching this video, guys. If you've enjoyed it, please keep it here at Words About Games. We've got tons of content, including our weekly podcast, more impressions videos, patch notes, and our weekly indie game of the week. We also stream over on Twitch at twitch.tv/wordsaboutgames every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday. And most importantly, have a great day.